Hello, I'm your host, John Wynn, and welcome to this episode of Midnight Conversations, the podcast all about having genuine conversations about every topic under the sun. Today, I'm joined by my very close friend, Han.
Hi guys.
And with that, let's just jump right into today's topic. So today's topic is brought to us, of course, by our guest, as it always is. Um, and Han has brought us the lovely topic of Asian parents. Now, if you do not know, both me and Han are Vietnamese, and so we sort of understand this sort of universal kind of feeling where an Asian household is really defined by the parents and the parenting style. It's very distinct, so much so that if you were to just sort of talk to any Asian kid, like doesn't even have to be Vietnamese, you could sit down and say, you could start talking about your experience with their parents, and they would be able to relate on almost an instant level. And so we want to sit here and kind of explore why it's so common and sort of what sort of comes out of a parenting style like this, because as both me and Han know, it's not always positive. There's definitely some downsides that we're not too big a fan of. So I'm gonna throw it over to Han. I'm gonna let her start with whatever she wants to pick out first. So
All right. So I guess like a good introduction to this would just be to compare it Asian culture versus American culture in terms of like growing up and raising your kids.
yes, that's good.
So obviously I'm pretty sure American culture, it's very what's the word? I guess they're more tolerant of things. They're more like
I want to
they're not
say individualistic.
yeah, they're not as much extreme. And versus like Asian culture, you're expected to act a certain way. You're expected to just have a sort of like path of education. They'll literally choose your education for you. And by the way, you have two options. It's either law or medical. You don't really get other choices besides that. So
Yeah, like it just I don't mean to cut you off, but just on that very specific note, I actually had to spend, I want to say, like half a year to a year convincing my parents to let me go into psychology, and they were only okay with it because it was tangentially like related to medical.
yeah, I've experienced similar to you. I mean, I have actually told my mother that I switched majors into vet, but she still thinks I'm like, a pharmacy major, she still goes out to her coworkers and just brag and be like, "Yeah, my daughter's pursuing that pharmacy degree." And in my head, I'm just like, "No, no, I'm not. I'm going to that." Which is in the medical field, but obviously she's very strong-willed about the fact that, what, if you want it, animals are so hard to treat. They can't talk to you, they can't tell you where they feel hurt or anything, humans are just better.
Yeah, human doctors only.
Exactly, and, in my head, I'm just like, "That's just not for me." My sister was already forced into the medical field and nursing-wise, and I'm already like, "Well, you have 1 kid there, so."
Yeah, so this is what I was saying when I was saying that American culture is more individualistic because um sort of like in the Asian household, you don't necessarily get to strike out on your own and do things without your family's like distinct approval, because if I choose to change my hair color, get an earring, change my major to something that I like more that isn't one of the big two, um it's not like okay, like you are actually put at fault because you didn't consult your parents first. And I feel that in American culture, like with a lot of my friends that I've talked to, like they have the ability to sort of go out and do their own thing without needing to like really run through their parents for approval. I mean, obviously it's not like everybody's like that, but it just seems way more welcome in the sort of like American household than the Asian household, you know?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. And another thing I've noticed is that age is a very huge factor in Asian culture that's not really a big thing in American culture. Like, for Asian culture, that whoever is older in terms of like sibling wise or like any like respected adult who's older than you, automatically your point of view or your opinions are a little less recognized. Like whatever they have to say is probably more accepted than what you have to say simply because of their age.
Yeah, it's a really interesting phenomenon. It's like a person discounting your opinion because of your like race or like hair color or if you had tattoos or something. Like, but instead it's age and it's like the entire Asian hierarchy. Like you sort of just can't really offer so many opinions that like don't get shot down just right away. And it's so common with my family actually. Like I would offer like an opinion or advice about something and then my parents would just ignore me. They're just like, you're not old enough, we're just gonna go with what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
then when it blows up in their face because they didn't like do research or anything, they just say that it's not a big deal. And if I say that I was right, then they'll get at me for talking back. So it's just like it's so frustrating because you feel that you're constantly being stifled at all times because you're not good enough in sort of like the like age for some reason is a metric for good enough and you're not good enough because you're not old enough.
Yeah. I experienced the same things you have, obviously, where I try to give my mother advice or something about like just simple stuff, and then she'll be like, "Oh, you don't need to tell me that. I already know this." Or like because she's like, "Oh, I already experienced this. I already know this." And obviously, when it does backfire, you really can't say anything or you can't even give a positive input or anything or like have them constructive advice to just be like, okay, maybe next time you should listen to me because automatically it's just shot down because they're older than you and you have to
Yeah.
listen or the other way around.
There's also this permeating thing that you always respect your elders. And I mean, it is a pretty good. It's actually a pretty good piece of advice. Honestly, you should respect your elders. But they also use it as a way to sort of get away with unfair things. Like if your parents get unreasonably mad and angry at you for something that you didn't do, and then you yell back at them, you're suddenly at fault
Yes.
because you didn't act accordingly, even though they also didn't act accordingly.
Mhm.
So there's this aura of understanding for adults. Like if my dad yells at me, my mom say, he had a long day at work. He was really stressed.
Mhm.
It's okay if he gets a little mad. But if I get mad, it's not okay because I'm acting like a child, and that's the problem that
Yeah.
that I see a lot. So it's just frustrating because there's no real outlet for that.
Mhm.
Like your parents like unreasonably make you angry because of the complete discount of your opinions and sort of your place in the family just because like you're younger and there's no real place to put that anger.
Yeah, because you're right, you don't have no outlets because obviously another thing that I notice is comparatively, American culture have a tighter bond with their families, and
Hmm.
feel like they're a really good, like or sometimes they can be really good emotional support. But with Asian culture and Asian parents, it's very hard to come to them for any sort of like problems, sometimes even advice, because you always feel like you're disappointing them or that they will always like fight back at you saying that, oh, well, this is your fault, or like, oh, you should have listened to me. It's never something that's like a constructive criticism really given to you or that they'll really listen to you. It's always something that, oh, you could have done better, or oh, this is your fault. So why?
Yeah. As a psychology student, like I've seen the sort of effects that this sort of style has, that Han's mentioning here, and that if you sort of can never go to your family for emotional support, and if you also happen to not have like a really big support network in terms of friends or people around you, you're left in a really bad spot because there's no one you can talk to about your emotional issues. And just not being able to talk to anyone about your emotional issues when you're young is just really bad. I know this firsthand because this is actually exactly what happened to me. um, in that my parents were emotionally unavailable. I was going through emotional issues. I didn't have a whole lot of friends. So I just felt like I just didn't really have anyone to go to. And I just felt like really bad inside at all the times. Like it was just like a really soul crushing thing. And I actually developed depression out of this. I'm of course a lot better now. Now that I have a firm support network, I've gotten professional help and things like that. But it's um, it's actually really understated how much of the sort of Asian cultural lifestyle really impacted my mental health because it's just a constant erosion of your self-esteem. I feel that's like the biggest one.
Mhm.
Like you're constantly feeling that you're you're disrespected, you're not taken seriously, you're not good enough, you're crazy or you act weird because you're a kid and you need to grow up. And then on top of that, there's no one to boost your sometimes there's no one to boost your self-esteem. I mean, if your family is constantly always pointing out your weaknesses, if you maybe don't have the best friends or you're even getting bullied, you're in a really bad spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you because I obviously too also experienced this because I know growing up it was kind of hard for me to find any friends because my family would be constantly moving around and I had 4 different elementary schools, 2 different middle schools, and I finally stayed at a high school for, like, 4 years. So I had always problems, like, fitting in and finding friends. And whenever I turned to my family, like my sister or my mom, always felt this sort of disconnection because I they were always working, and it's always an expectant of me to be, fine or normal. Like, you have to be perfect. And when that happens, it just slowly builds up over the years, and I actually kinda, like, developed sort of an eating problem, so I exponentially gained a lot of weight, and I remember that not only did my mom not really specifically ask me, like, what is there to help me with or, like, I guess more of, like, comfort me. She was very critical of the fact that I gained weight, and she would always constantly say, like, "Oh, look at blank's daughter, she's doing dance, she's doing medical, she's so pretty, like, be more like her," or, like, "Look at this person, you should lose weight, you should motivate yourself to be like this." But what really that does for me on the inside is just adding another, like, cut because it's not helping me, it's just making me feel more and more ashamed of myself and less willing to come to them to help me.
Yeah, so like the phrase I use all the time is you don't need a lecture, you need a hug.
Exactly, yes.
Like you don't need someone to point out all the things that are wrong and tell you how to get better. You just need someone to tell you it's gonna be okay. And you just don't get that. And it's rough. And so I mean, we paint the picture pretty bad because honestly the picture's not that great. There's obviously some benefits. You we usually are pretty usually see this parenting style produce very disciplined, smart kids. They're polite, they have manners, they're reserved, they're not like out there. But the price of that is I think it's almost like the price that is your ability to really properly process your emotions. I feel
Mhm.
like, you you kind of lack that emotional intelligence because there's no one modeling it for you. And I even see sometimes people have a really hard time saying they're sorry and saying they're wrong because their parents never show them that. Or, I've seen people who are really reserved and they're really, really, like, sort of like pulled back because they're afraid that because they're so used to that if they mess up they'll get yelled at or shouted at or criticized. So when they meet friends that aren't like that, it's kind of a surprise because they'll say something, and then you'll, like, open your mouth, and they might recoil a bit, like, physically, just because, like, they're so used to being criticized and things like that, and it's just it's just, like it's almost like a destruction of your identity. Like, you, as a person, are just a member of the family. Your identity is the family. You help the family. You are with the family. The family is the most important thing.
Yeah.
But as a result, you lose the you, you know? Like, you lose sort of the person you are and your sort of central identity along the way. And so that's actually one of the really great reasons that I'm really glad I grew up here in America, because through interaction with my friends and other people, I saw that it doesn't have to be like that. You know, you can be like confident in yourself. You can be your own individual person. Your self-worth is good. You don't have to constantly, be better to satisfy someone's arbitrary expectations.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all you said. Like that really was. But yeah, I definitely see that we did kind of paint a very bad picture for the Asian culture, but like you said, it's not super great either. And I also noticed that it's very hard for them to find a balance between raising kids in Asian culture, but also having to accept that we're in America and there's a lot of American culture that's gonna seep through. And I I think most of the time that they kind of think that their children are rebelling when they're starting to accept or like show individual personalities or characteristics because of the American culture. And for them, it kind of feels like they're losing their child. So yeah, it's a weird concept, but I think
Yeah.
balance is a very hard thing to do.
I agree with that completely, because like there's this idea that you're supposed to grow up you're supposed to grow up essentially in the way that your parents want you to, and the archetype is good Asian kid, you know? And not to mention, I'm pretty sure me and Han are both first generation. So our parents are immigrants, so they sort of grew up like literally in Asia. So when we grow up here, there's this difference, because the the idea is just that, like, you, as a good Asian kid, you're always working hard, you're always striving to be better, you're always, doing all you can to help out the family. And so when, we start to take care of our own mental health, for example, we take break days, we give ourselves free time, we make sure that we're not overworking ourselves for the price of productivity. It feel to them, it feels like we're not proper,
Mhm.
because a proper Asian kid wouldn't do that. They would continue working hard. They'd work themselves to the bone, because that's what you need to do to be successful and to, be better for the family. But the price of all that hard work is, you're wearing yourself out. Like, we're not robots, we're humans, and you can only take so much. So when we start to recognize that we can have time for ourselves, we can sort of not, we don't have to work ourselves to death, it's a very big clash, because suddenly you have your parents saying that, you're sort of like betraying the family, you're not, you don't care about the family. They throw that one out a lot, and I mean a
Yeah.
lot, that you don't care about the family, that you're lazy, that you only think about yourself, that you're selfish, that we pay for your food and the roof over your head, and yet you decide that you want to go hang out with your friends.
Yeah. I I'm pretty sure this is a common thing, but they'll always say, "Back in my day." So
Yeah, 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 yeah.
guilt trip thing where you had a hard week, you worked all the time, you had a bunch of school, you maybe had an exam or two, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna go and hang out with a friend. And then immediately when you're about to hit the door, they're just like, oh, so you're just gonna leave now? Like, you're not gonna spend time with your family, you're not gonna help me out. And then you're like, well, I want a break day. And they're like, well, back in my day, there's no break days. And instantly you stand there and you get a lecture of how much you're failing them, or that
Yeah.
they have it harder, so you should also work as hard.
And like it's just uh this is a lot of flashbacks because this happens so often. Like me and Han may be mentioning it one time, but this literally happens probably, I want to say, multiple times per week for like the past 20 years.
Yeah.
So um it's just a matter of like, we're supposed to, as kids, we're supposed to consider the sort of struggles of our parents, but our parents don't consider our struggles because because they're not legitimate. you know the only struggles that matter is working a lot and important things like school and stuff like that. Like
Mhm.
if I do a lot of school work and they see that I'm doing it, they actually leave me alone. They treat me really well because they're just like, he's doing hard work. But if I'm really tired from my job, for example, which both me and Han worked in a tea shop, the same tea shop actually. Um, if I worked a really hard week and then I was just like, I want to rest and stuff, my parents would actually like be on me. They're just like, "Oh, you're just working that stupid job. You should just quit," or like, "It's just tea. Like, how hard can it be?" And so there's this devaluing of the struggles that you've been through, and so you just constantly feel like you're the bad guy, like all the time,
Yeah.
because you're just constantly being told you're either a failure, you don't love the family enough, you're wasting your time, and it is exhausting.
Oh my gosh, all the PTSD is coming back to me.
Yeah, it's like swimming to the top of my head, but um, it's just like, obviously it gets easier with time because as you grow older, you sort of realize that you have the ability to sort of splinter off from your family in your own way. So eventually you do the move out stuff, eventually you do the like self-determination and all that. But it's just uh I I don't regret like gaining the really important skills that help me reach where I am right now. Like there's a reason I'm disciplined and polite, I guess, and that like, I work hard and have good work ethic. But um I don't think that a pure, like, this may be a hot take. I don't think the pure Asian way of raising a child is like good at all. I personally I believe that sacrificing sort of like the mental health and just the wellness of the individual in like completely, like, just so you can have good results or like success or things like that, I don't think it's ever worth it. I think that's never a good trade.
I definitely agree with you on that. It's obviously, as you said, it's very beneficial as like a person in society to be, hardworking, have, like a work schedule, had a like a very good work ethic. Everyone respects you for that. And, all of that glorious things in terms of work and being successful in life. But then when you turn into the private life, you aren't really left with very good people skills. You've never ever been able to properly express yourself with your parents. And if you don't have a good social group of friends, you're kind of left between like a rock and a hard place, because you've never developed proper people skills. You don't know how to make friends. It's very susceptible for you to just be, like, in a very bad mental place. It's just I remember back when I was younger and I sucked at having people skills. I was the very reserved, quiet Asian kid in class. I had very good grades all the time, like, very good grades, but then I had no friends. I didn't know how to make friends, and when I started to, they were all just people that were just using me to get the homework, so they would just copy off my homework or, like, copy off my notes or anything, and I let them do that because I kind of thought that, oh, they like me, like if I let them do that, they're going to be friends with me. We'll hang out, we'll have fun. And when I finally met my actual friends, they kind of just looked at me and they're just like, that's not right. Like, like blank person, you shouldn't let them do that to you. And in my head, I was just like, really? Is that how it is? So I definitely agree that it's very detrimental to raise your kids up in that sort of way or environment because it makes them so dissociated from actual social skills. They have
Yeah.
absolutely nothing.
And the thing is, like, your parents sometimes would just straight up be okay with you not having friends.
Yes.
Like
They
like you're spending more time around the house, you're helping around the house, you're helping at maybe the shop, you have free child labor or whatever. Just like they're okay with that, which is not the best. Like the fact that they just necessarily don't like value like social skills and things like that. But a really important distinction I want to make is that I don't think my parents are bad people, and I don't think Asian parents are bad people.
yeah, same.
But I think that what they're doing is that they're raising kids the way they were raised themselves.
Mhm.
And because in Asia, in the actual countries themselves, you're always raised this way. It's the way you know. The greatest thing I can ever fault my parents for is the unwillingness to adapt, to realize that maybe the way you're doing things is wrong, or that it can be better and changing. So, like I really don't want to make the distinction that Asian parents are bad people. I don't think they are. I think that rather they're traditional. They're doing it sort of the way they always knew. But I think it would be a lot of benefit, sort of, that kids would get raised, you know, sort of in a different way. And I think that's sort of the job of the first generation. Like we get hit with the brick that is traditional Asian values and being raised that way. And then when we have kids, we remember how bad it was, so we take the brick away and we do it better. So like it's just I think like it's almost as if it's like a monkey's paw situation. You know that sort of concept?
Mhm.
Yeah, so for those who don't, it's like a mythical item where you get 5 wishes, one for every finger. But every time you wish for something, it has like a really big downside. So you grab the paw in your hand. You're thinking about the future of your kids, and you say, "I want my kids to be successful, well disciplined, smart, and I want them to, really be achievers. I want them to be kids that I can be proud of." And the price of all that is, like a eroded self-esteem, serious people problems, issues all around. Just like it's 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 like the mental emotional side of a person doesn't exist in Asian culture. It's just not a thing. Like it's just something they don't consider ever because you're just expected. You're just like whatever your personal problems is, you can handle it because you don't want to burden your family. But the best way to solve those mental issues, especially as a psychology major, the best way to solve those mental issues is talking about people, being able to ask for help, being able to say, I'm not a burden to other people if I ask them for help because that's what they're here for. They're here for me, you know? So, like, I, the thing is just like, I can't even say, like, oh, they just need to change because we are the change, we are the shift from traditional values to avant-garde new American values.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that we're kind of expected now to be the stepping stone into a different way of raising our like future kids. And I definitely agree with you on your mental health being a very important thing that and it's perfectly fine to recognize that you're not okay because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you can accept that you have problems and then you can actually say, okay, how do I deal with these problems? Because A big factor, I feel like, in the way Asian cultures kinda treat their kids or they raise them up in that sort of way is that they actually they're so used to that way of, like, life or way of raising their kids, a very traditional way, that they don't even realize that they have problems. They just expect that it's they're so used to it. They're like, "Oh, it's fine. It's okay. It's not a problem." But once you get to the point where you realize, "Okay, I have problems," that's where you can start making changes and make yourself better.
Oh yeah, that's a great like sort of like final point for what we're doing because it's time's stretching a little, but the there's just a constant feeling in a lot of Asian kids that I've met, or honestly, even just in other households that are like this. Not necessarily just Asian households. I've seen it a lot in Hispanic households as well in sort of the culture. Um, but the idea that your problems are normal, that you normalize the fact that you have issues and you tuck it away because you're supposed to be like it's supposed to be like a sacrifice thing, like you bear your problems so your parents are unburdened, so you don't, so you can support your family. It's like you're taking the sacrifice for your family, but like from experience it's not something worth sacrificing. It just isn't. Like
It's not
you as a person has value, and you shouldn't throw it away in pursuit of an arbitrary success, a letter on your piece of paper, or a number in your bank account.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you just said. You have value, and no matter what is going on or what's happening, one a hard lesson that I've learned, and I'm pretty sure you've learned, and a lot of people have learned, is that no matter what's going on, you are the most important thing in your life. Because if you fall apart, then there's really nothing left. There's no point. Like if you get a really good job or you have a really, really great like boyfriend, girlfriend, like person, but then you feel miserable inside, you're not happy. Like nothing you're just not happy. Nothing else is going to make you happy unless you learn to just accept that okay, I need to fix my own problems.
Yeah, it's a really valuable thing that you learn, and I think this is a great sort of finalizing point in that if you listen to this, especially if you grew up in an Asian household and you feel like you've sort of been in there, like there's so many places to sort of get help in any way, and you don't even have to do it with your family. My family doesn't even know that I have mental issues or that I seek professional help. Like if you're listening to this and you're just like, wow, that checks a lot of boxes, maybe try talking to someone. And can just be your friends on a podcast like I'm doing right now with my great friend Han. And just like talk it out, maybe at midnight, per se, like something like a midnight conversation. I don't know, that sounds fun. um but so we're gonna wrap it up because we want to keep these little short and sweet, little size of maybe like a Nickelodeon show. um So I want to thank Han. This was actually a really, really great discussion. Revisit a lot of memories. That's not your fault. That's mine. But uh, I'm really glad we sort of could have this talk, and it's a really great exploration of sort of what this life is like.
Yeah, it was such such a great conversation, and yeah, definitely brought up a lot of PTSD. I mean, they did bring up good and bad memories, but thank you for having me. It's been super fun.
Yeah, so we may have Han again on in the future, maybe for a different thing, not just because we're both Asian, but who knows? But that is all the time we have for today. So we want to say to our wonderful audience, we want to say thanks for listening. Thank you to my guest, of course, Han. Her Instagram, I think, will be linked. I don't know. Maybe she wants to. Maybe she doesn't. If it's not there, then Han's a mystery. And we'll see you all when midnight comes around again. Thank you for listening.